A very good morning to all of you who are live here today. And for those of you catching up on YouTube, then good morning or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is the second in our short series of 3 talks on generosity, and in particular, Mahayana generosity, the Bodhisattva's generosity. So, yes, let's start with a good motivation. And my wife Kathy has not been very well yesterday and this morning, so I think I'm here for an hour and a half with you all, but if I might suddenly have to disappear, in which case, sorry in advance. So anyway, let's start today with really, really good motivation, especially in this topic of generosity, where the Bodhisattva's generosity is literally to give everything you are, to give yourself to everyone. You are given, and it's a given that you are given. And you give up everything to give yourself to everybody. It's the heart of it. And so let's make a special effort to feel as much loving care as we can for our fellow beings, and think that we're here to listen. And what are we doing? I'm going blah, blah, blah. You're listening. We're having a conceptual interaction. It's all words and ideas. We're not actually going out and giving something to anybody. We are giving our attention to a topic. So anyway, let's think that we're doing this really as an investment for our own maturity, so that we are a better friend for all beings. Thank you. Sonje chodan soji chonamla jancho bado dani chapsunji dagi jinso jipe sanamji drola penchira sonje drop parasho samchen tamche dewa tang dewe judang dem parajochi dongal dang dokmal ji judang tralwara jochi dongal mepe dewa tampa dang men tralwara jochi Nirin chatan ne tang tralwe tang yom chempo la ne paran jura chin. Deyata shamme shamavati shammeta shatru am kurimara jite karota ke ore tejovati ollo yane Vishodani male malapanaye kukure kaka grase grasana omuke paramuke amuke shamedoane sawagraha bandanane nigri taba sawa bhava paravadina vimukta marapasha savidva buddha mudra Anun katita savamare putsarita pari shuddhe reka shantu savamara kamani. Palen sawe lama rinpoche dagye chivara pende den shula. Kadrin champo kone jezonte kuson tuche madrup sadhu swa. So, generosity. There's a sort of, I think I mentioned it last week, a mandra, a preliminary practice before we even enter into generosity. And I think many of us have done it in our lives, but it's just to simply investigate the whole idea of giving, then if we go back a step, giving implies possession. What does ownership mean? What does it mean to have? In order to give, you have to have. What really is having? So I remember in the 60s, a lot of us thought about this, and what is, can anybody really own anything? What is ownership? There's an object, there's you. What makes you own it? It's social convention. We kind of agree, this belongs to this one, and that belongs to that one. And it's just amazing, like with property, a piece of land. The land doesn't change when it changes ownership, it's the same thing. People go into a solicitor's office, make a squiggle on a piece of paper, and now it belongs to this one, not to that one. So I'm not here to talk about all of that, or communist values, or why in the 60s and the 70s people suddenly stopped talking so much about ownership and talked about stewardship, or interesting things like Napoleonic law, British law, where like in British law, you can leave everything you've got to your cat. In French law, it doesn't belong to you in the first place. It belongs to your family line. So you can't even give it to your favorite child, only a little bit more to one than the other. You're a steward of a family inheritance, and so on. So the whole idea of giving is based on having. But then, once we've thought through that, and our mind boggles at what having really is, then there's a difference between giving and generosity. And just generally, conventionally, if you look up generosity on Wikipedia, which of course I did to see what the party line there was, then it's quite good what they say there. We're giving a lot of the time. If you pay for something in a shop, you're giving as a transaction. Something that was yours, the money in your pocket, you give to somebody else. But that's not generosity. So having, parting with what you have so that somebody else has it, is giving, but giving isn't generosity. Generosity has generally this quality of goodness, kindness. You've done a good thing, a beneficial thing. You've given, it says on Wikipedia, out of caritas, out of some love, kindness, feeling in your heart. So when there is generosity and not just giving, then we can create the karma of generosity. If the giving were just transfer, this is something Akarimcha used to say, it's part of a series of exercise. You could take something and you could put it in this hand, you've given it, you could put it in that hand. You could make a lot of generosity by just giving. But of course, that's not what generosity is about. Now, that's a silly way to express it. But very often we think of generosity in terms of the material transaction that takes place. Giving a lot of money, giving a lot of your time. But when we look at karma, then we see that in the karma we generate through giving, then the mind component, the mental component, mainly the motivation, but not only, is very important. And so it says you can give little, but with a beautiful mind, strong mind, a very big mind, envisioning, visualizing many things. And so you may give tiny thing, you just give somebody a biscuit, but it could make powerful karma, and you could give a lot of your time, a lot of possessions, a lot of wealth. But if the motivation is, let's use a nice English word, piddling, if it's a piddling motivation, small, weak motivation, then even though you've given a lot materially, it won't necessarily make a big karma. And then all sorts of variations and combinations. When we study karma, it says in order for an action to become a karma, we have 6 components. They all need to be there to make karma. And then depending on how strong or weak each one of them is, then the karma will be powerful, far-reaching, or not. So there we have generosity, making karma, and the power of karma is what makes the world go round. So that's the sort of basic teachings of the Buddha. There is a moral, mental component to this universe. Science hasn't discovered it yet, not surprisingly, because science uses nearly totally material tools to measure material things. And anyway, that's a big topic, but certainly the Buddha's teaching is that there is a basic moral fiber to what happens, to what takes place, and so that when there is kindness and help for each other, harmony, cooperation, less ego, then this brings pleasant, happy, agreeable consequences. And when we harm each other and so on, we act selfishly, greedily, then this brings harmful consequences to ourselves. So there's having, leads to giving. Out of all the giving, then some giving is generosity, because the mind associated with the giving in the 6 aspects. Some of the 6 aspects, the motivation before you give, the reason why you're doing it, the motivation, driving force behind it. The mind actually while you're giving. And then when the action's finished, immediately afterwards, did you tick it off? Were you happy about it? Or is there a feeling of regret? These 3 phases of mind contribute to the making of karma. So there's generosity, karma. The results of that are complicated, but there is a kind of like for like basic idea. If we give food, then in future lives we'll be well looked after. If we give shelter, then we'll find it easier to find a home, to have a good home, to not have it taken from us, and so on. And so there's that kind of thing. As I mentioned last week, the mental component's very important, so that what is wealth and poverty, we looked at that last week, that's in the mind. So you can feel very wealthy, satisfied with what you have, even if you have little, or you can feel dissatisfied with what you have, even if you have so much. So the karma of wealth and poverty, and we see the results of this all around us. People who've got so much but who are dissatisfied, and the opposite, and then people who really, they work their fingers to the bone, but then they only just get by. Other people have got the magic touch with my business. One of my lifelong friends from Samiling, so good at any business he gets into, he knows what to do, it works, and he's got good, that kind of business karma. Some people are born into wealth, but they're not happy. Some very vivid examples just now on the bookshelves. And, there's all sorts of things. So there is, now we're talking about generosity, giving with a good mind, and both the rebirth that causes in upper realms, better states, human, divine. Sometimes people wonder, why are the devas devas? How did they get there? How did Brahma get to become Brahma? And so on, whatever they are. Then generosity is a huge part of it. Good mind, good actions, very clean, very pure. And then that combined with meditation, where you make your mind very calm and stable and reliable. So anyway, we've got the karma of generosity, but there you are still going to be reborn. Your karma is going to run out. That's what karma does. So here we're looking in this course at Buddhist generosity. So basically, Buddha needs to teach the nuts and bolts of generosity so that at least we are making our future lives happier. But the main point of the Buddha's teaching is that we get out of the endless cycle of rebirth, of course. Get out of that for something that's better. So that homes in on the mind. How do we get out of the endless round of rebirths? Like it or not, your karma makes you reborn. So how to get out is to understand this thing, which is summed up by ego. When we look at ego in a little bit more detail in the Abhidharma, then we break it down into four. It's I am, I have. So that's me and mine. And then also ego means how we define ourselves. Me and mine, but also us and ours. So when we look around us, people define themselves through a group. Family is the most obvious example. And so you can be, how can you say, a bit selfless in your family because you're dedicated to whatever it is, partner, children, brothers, sisters, the group. So you can be quite selfless inside that, but ruthlessly selfish in terms of protecting the family, making sure they're well looked after at the disadvantage of everybody else. So the whole question of getting out of samsara is a question of understanding identity projection, the constant way we, inside ourselves, tell the story of me. And we see that's through who I am, what I have, who we are, as the groups you identify with, and what we have and do. So in Buddhist generosity, primarily we're looking at getting rid of ego delusions. Not getting rid of yourself, because we want to get rid of the delusions so that we discover who or what we really are. It's not self-destructive, it's self-awakening. Big story. But in that, generosity plays a key role, and then their language is helpful for a change, because generosity, to give, means giving up. Giving up. And giving up also is nice in language. Giving up. Giving up. Offering, but also giving up this relentless struggle to hang on to what we are. I talked about that last week a little bit. This clinging, this gripping onto what we have, material possessions, and then clinging to things like reputation, what we feel makes us stand out above others, physical prowess, mental prowess, and then our fixed ideas. When they're challenged, life can get very, very interesting when our fixed ideas get challenged by other people, by our Dharma teachers, by life. We cling to lots of things for many reasons, for desire, through fear, and so on. There is a lot of clinging and a fear of letting go. So in order to get out of the round of rebirth, then all Buddhists are primarily concerned with getting rid of the harmful delusions of identity, self. On the Bodhisattva path, we replace them by helpful delusions of identity. They're the Bodhisattva. It's wonderful. It's a nice, smooth, user-friendly replacing of harmful delusions, self-harm, harm for others, to helpful ideas, let's say, rather than delusions. And then from the Bodhisattva vision of oneself, it's very easy to slip into a more absolute or objective truth. That happens step by step. So learning to let go is vital, learning to give up, learning to offer everything we are, that we have, that we do, and so on, to the general benefit, the general well-being, and identifying not with an individual me, but identifying with the common good, and identifying with this so-called path that we're on as a journey to liberation. So that's for all Buddhists. So we've gone from giving to generosity, from generosity not just for the good karma, for making a better future, but from generosity as a vital tool, mainly concerning our mind and its attitude of having and possessing and clinging, to getting liberation. And then today we'll be moving into the Bodhisattva's Buddhist practice of generosity, which is so that the mind attains its own purity, perfection, innate and natural goodness. And so that involves letting go, giving up, but it goes deep, 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 deep into what we call shunyata, or voidness, where we come to understand the rigid projections we've made onto reality and how they stand in the way of a mind which is so beautiful, so useful. So anyway, that's the master plan. I hope to show these kind of paliers in French, these levels, where giving, generosity for good karma, generosity for freedom from samsara, generosity to become Buddha. Then next week, we move on to the same thing, generosity to become Buddha, but the special methods for practicing generosity in Vajrayana. Now, what we started last week was going through Gampopa's text, and I think we need to go back to that to finish it, because it gives us, let's say, the basic nuts and bolts of generosity. And if you can hear a constant squeaking in the background, it's my office chair, which needs a bit of tightening up. So it's rather annoying. I'm totally used to it, but I think I need to get some spanners out and fix it. So I think last week we ended the section on material generosity, giving stuff, with a quotation, and the quotation was about giving joyfully, with respect, personally, at the right time, and without harming others. We did that, I think it was towards the end, so I probably rushed it. So I'd like to say, one thing that's often struck me, that Akon Rinpoche pointed out to me, and afterwards I recognized it in myself, and then I often hear it in others. It says, giving at the right time. Now, that could easily be misunderstood or understood as timeliness. But the main point is you don't give, or you don't, in fact, here it means promise something until you've got it. And it's quite an interesting discipline to do that, because often we anticipate tomorrow or next year. You're all too young, I think. But when I was a boy, there was a TV series, I think probably based on books, called Billy Bunter. Now, Billy Bunter was at a private school, and he's always trying to cadge money, borrow money, and saying, I've got a check coming from Pater very soon, and I'll pay you back then. So it's knowing there's money coming in, or at least thinking there's money coming in, or hoping. And so we promise to give. And so it's quite an interesting self-discipline I found for myself. Every time I was about to say, I'll do that, or I'll give you this then, and I realized, I don't have it yet. And so then didn't say it, because that was my teacher's instruction. When you start doing it yourself, then you realize how people are banking on an imaginary future to be able to accomplish what they want to do. And it feels nice to promise, I'll do this. But we never know. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that, and especially in terms of this quote, giving at the right time means giving when you actually got it. And then we saw we give without harming others. This is about collective wealth that you have power over, but your giving has implications for other people around you, your family, people in the business that you run or that you have power within. And so we must be aware of the damage that our power over material property can bring about. Last week we looked at our modern, connected, strange world where it's not isolated Tibetan villages where life is simple. So everything we do, every financial transaction, it's all connected. There are so many ethical questions. It's great. These have been aired extensively in the last few decades. But so now many of us are aware, you pick up something in the supermarket. Where did this come from? Were people exploited, making it, growing it? Is the supermarket ripping off the farmers? And then how's it packaged? And so on. So the simple act of going in to buy something to give to somebody else is connected one way or another. So many impossible questions to answer. Clothes you buy, they're made in sweatshops, terrible working conditions, not like conditions in our own country, of course. That's why it's cheap labor. But then in those countries, a job in a sweatshop better than no job at all, better than dying of hunger. It's impossible to think about. So complicated. But anyway, as best we can, we try to give in a way that doesn't harm others. Now, there was just a tiny bit at the end of that section. We're on page 9 in your support document. It says, give again and again in order to fulfill wishes most perfectly. So you can't do generosity and move on. Generosity will be an ongoing process, and sometimes it is antagonizingly tantalizing. How about that? It's about your space. You know, Buddhist generosity to remove your ego. Ego wants territory. It has a comfort space, comfort possessions. It defines, this is okay. Here I've got a bit much. I can afford to share some. And then here it's getting a bit tight. I'm out of my comfort zone. It's totally arbitrary. And it's amazing when life circumstances surprise us how that definition of comfort can change what you are happy with, satisfied with, feel okay about. Anyway, if we're on this Buddhist path, which will catalyze circumstances, then we will be challenged very often so that the space, the territory our ego needs is reduced. For Buddhists, this is good news. Wonderful. We don't want to become masochists. We don't want to say, come on, bring it on, bring it on. Okay. Make it harder for me. Make it even harder. Come on, I can take more. Goodness me. I read the other day how Harry Houdini died. Do you know her? And I suppose, I don't want an answer, so I'm not going to turn on your microphones. But Houdini, the great escapologist of the past, one of his things he used to do was he was very strong stomach muscles, and he'd invite people to punch him. And so he knew how to hold the muscles so that people could punch him very hard. So before a stage show, he was in his dressing room and lying down because he'd had an injury somewhere else in his body. He was resting before his performance. He had an acquaintance who didn't like his views on religion, and that person started punching him on the stomach to see what he could take, but he wasn't in the right position. And in the end, he had to say, please stop, because it was hurting. So what neither of them knew was that he had an appendix which was on the brink. And anyway, within a couple of days, he died. So this kind of, I can take it, bring it on, bring it on. That's where I got diverted with Harry Houdini. We don't want generosity in the larger sense of letting go our clinging, letting go our territory, our space, which is there on a Buddhist path to help you get rid of ego. We don't want our practice of generosity to be reinforcing ego, where I can take it, I can be even more of an ascetic, I can do with less, don't worry about me, where it's kind of, you're building up a reputation of being somebody who can let go. It's tricky. Ego is tricky. It's often said, if we've had hundreds, thousands of past lives, how come we're still here with all these Buddhist teachings? And the answer is, what we call ego is a very tricky survivor. A very, very, very tricky survivor. And we have to honor that. You have to know your adversary well in order to win. So anyway, it says give again and again. It will be an ongoing process, and more, we can put it that way, will be asked of us. There's more and more we can learn. There's more and more we can grow, mature, through the opportunities of letting go, space, territory. That's really what now our Buddhist practice of generosity is about. Then we can start calling it paramita, perfection of generosity. The word paramita is used in the Theravada tradition, it's used in the Shravaka level of Buddhism, and it's used in Mahayana. But it's used differently. So now if we look at basic Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, there, if our letting go of clinging, if our letting go of clinging is getting rid of ego, helping us on the path to liberation from suffering and rebirth, then it's paramita of generosity. What we'll see later on this morning is what we need in Mahayana, in the Bodhisattva path, for it to merit the name paramita, perfection of generosity. But anyway, it says give again and again. So it's not finished. We have to give more and more. And because our habit of ego and clinging, and also our habits of greediness and fear, they're deeply embedded, they manifest in a repetitive way, then we need to give again and again and again. We can't just get a little buttonhole badge and think, I've given, I've done that one, what's the next one? It doesn't work like that. And then it says, give again and again in order to fulfill wishes. So we are trying to bring well-being to others. And we saw earlier on, there are things which are right to give and not right to give. So we've done that. So that's all about material generosity, giving stuff, possessions. I think we can extend it into what involves stuff and possessions into more general territory, let's say. We've got marvelous examples of territory with animals. Where I do my daily exercise, it's in the garage. And so the other day, a cat came and pissed on the entrance right in front of me. And it came up, it looked very sweet. It was looking at me, and I had a bit of eye contact, said a couple of mantras. And then it just turned around and waggled its tail and left the most revolting smell on the winter jasmine bush at the entrance to the garage. Well, that's what they do. It was marking its territory. So in the family, in the workplace, then people make territory. It's sort of in the material world of manifestation. It's amazing. Inside a house, these boxes where a family lives, mum, dad, brother, sister. The invisible rules of what you can do, can't do, who holds the power. There's a lot of cat pissing going on all the time. And then I saw in Samiling, a Buddhist community, wonderful, full of enlightened beings, you bet. So somebody gets a job. Often it's a job they've never done before. They're put, whatever it is, better not name any because people start making associations. But you can guarantee if they've been doing that job for 3 months, then the cat pissing has happened. There's territory. There's fear of somebody taking over, things having to be done differently. It's to do with stuff, even though it's mental. It's in the mind. So anyway, what we're going on now next is the second main area of generosity, which is supportive generosity. Now, this isn't when you're giving stuff. It's when you're giving of yourself, giving your time to help those in need. They need your strength. They need your counsel. They need maybe just to talk with you on the phone. And there are people, it's funny, when they're regular talkers on the phone, sometimes they've got an inner clock. And you know, if this person phones and they want help, they want a bit of friendship or support, or sometimes they're quite upset, you kind of know this one, it's an hour. Okay, so forget everything for the next hour. Once you've picked up the phone, it will kind of start off in a panic and end up with a good feel. And then you can say goodbye. Others, it's an hour and a half. And then some, it's even 2 hours. And some is quite quick. But that kind of situation, people need you. And these days, because time is so precious, mainly they need your time, but also, your wisdom, and they need to be recognized often. They just need to be acknowledged that they exist on this earth, that they have feelings, and so on. Whatever it is, it's this kind of support that we can give from others. And it's very much connected with their fear, their instability, and their karma as well. So it says, this is to give protection for those who are afraid of robbers, thieves, beasts of prey, illness, water catastrophes, and so on. Yeah, we won't go there today. Maybe next week, when we look at Tara practice, if we do, you see Tara dispels 8 main fears, and then in there you get lions, crocodiles, and so on. And people think, yeah, okay, but in London there aren't that many crocodiles or or lions to be afraid of. But then you get the next layer of meaning, where you see lions represent pride, and a lot of fear comes from pride being threatened, and so on. And then all of those 8 fears, which look very external, in fact, are much more psychological. They've got deeper resonances. But anyway, that's the second area of giving. We need to give again and again, and to learn from the giving, to learn about ego, to learn about the me that we put in there. And especially if you're a giver, then you form an identity of a giver, a helper, and so on. And then the third of the 3 areas of generosity is giving the gift of Dharma. And we'll look at that in a second. But let's return to this topic of giving and giving up, letting go the clinging. So a few key words, especially from my own teacher, Akon Rinpoche, so often he would say, no expectation. No expectation of return is very important. It means that our giving should not be transactional. As we explore this in our prime task of giving in order to, of course, to make other people well, happy, whatever, but primarily because people come and go, circumstances to give come and go. We live with ourselves all the time. So our prime concern over the years, as we give here, give there, whatever it is our giving should be diminishing our ego clinging. If you look, a large part of ego clinging has an invisible balance sheet, an accounts book. Inside a family, I gave more. I've given you a lot. Parents to children, I've given so much. Parents do give so much, and children aren't aware of it. It's just the way they are. It's only when children, sometimes with luck, grow up and they realize how much their parents did for them, because their parents now, they can't pay back their parents, but they can pass on and do the same for their children, who will be ungrateful and not recognizing, and they won't realize until they grow up and they've got children and they can pass it on. But there is this feeling of, or the other way around, I owe you. You've done so much for me. And then these days, when we look at exploitation in couples, for instance, one of the things that's now officially recognized in Scottish law for, what's it called? Exploitation of your partner is called love bombing. Love bombing means you keep giving them things and giving them things so they feel indebted to you, and so you look like the kind and generous one, when in fact you are buying power. Manipulation. So this invisible accounts book, get rid of it. Simple as that. Because what does it do? It cultivates many things. Self-pity. My brother got a better deal than I did. It cultivates resent. It cultivates what? A self-definition that can cause a lot of pain. This is what it's about, self-definition. How you define yourself, what you identify with. We'll come back to that in a second. So it's part of samsara. And the best thing is learn to get rid of the accounts book. Now, you're going to die. I'm going to die. We're going to leave this life, and all those people, that family you've had all your life, your lifelong brother, sister, parents, parental story, all of that, that was this life. You're going to leave it and forget it. That's for sure, each one of us. But we take with us from this world into the bardo, and then eventually, as we grow up into the next life, this mind. This mind. If that mind is full of resent, self-pity, this fear or whatever, it's rubbish. So we don't take that with us. And the first step is throw out that account book. And especially if you're a bodhisattva, we're here to give, because it's through giving that we learn. It's through giving that we grow, through generosity. So any opportunity to give, and give more. And it will be challenging. Our territorial boundaries will be threatened, changed again and again. And so, all being well, you'll end up needing little or nothing. But on the way, it would be a miracle if that wasn't challenging. So we need to welcome the challenge and to throw away the account book and any kind of transactional relationship we have with others when it comes to giving more, giving less. Forget it. So how do we help ourselves with this? In Bodhisattva teachings, past lives, past mother, past kind parents, whoever it is now, even if they're your mean sister or whatever it is. In a past life, that person was your best friend, so kind to you. This is how we think. Just now there's a bit of a blip, okay, not in a good place, but that person is not just your past kind friend, but will become in the future a Buddha, maybe before you are a Buddha. So we think of them kindly, positively in the future, kindly, positively in the past. In that way, we help this mind of ours be happy, to go into the bardo, to go into the next life, not to carry resent, self-pity, feeling of having been ripped off by life. Life is unfair, or is it? Well, this is one of the things we'll be thinking about for the next few lives, about whether life is fair or not, just what is karma or not, and how is a generous mind, how can you be generous to yourself? This is what we're talking about. So now let's return to the text. I thought today, because time goes by so quickly, I must mention this accounts book, the feeling of a transaction rather than just you're a bodhisattva happy to give, full stop. That's what you're a bodhisattva, this is what bodhisattvas do. Maybe one thing I can add to that, one of my often repeated things, and I tell it through a story, quick story. I have a very, very lovely friend in Spain, and at one point she was in a busy market in Madrid. Yeah, Madrid. And in a busy kind of fruit market, men with barrows, and one of these barrows with a very big iron front to it for carrying crates. And the guy went right into the back of her leg, incredibly painfully. She knocked over onto the ground. She said she was there screaming in pain, and people were just walking by looking. One or two people took photos, but it took a couple of minutes before somebody actually came over. People don't want to get involved. And somebody came over and helped her and took her to a pharmacy, got something to put on it. And then after all of that, she was very thankful to the person. And the person said, nothing. It's normal. They say that in France as well. C'est normal. C'est normal. This is what anybody, what she said is, this is what anybody would do. Except it wasn't what anybody was doing, because they were taking photos and moving quickly away because something had happened. They didn't want to get involved and somebody's hurt, crying and all that kind of thing. So it wasn't what anybody would do. But in language and in our thinking, well, this is what any good person would do. This is the Bodhisattva. It's anybody. We are doing what any decent human being, any good person would do. So how could you not do it? Somebody's hurt on the ground, you go and help them. So bodhisattvas give. Bodhisattvas are happy for any opportunity to give. Woohoo! That's what bodhisattvas do. No account book, no transaction, and no thinking, and you know now in some future life, through this good action, boy, am I going to be well looked after. Bodhisattvas don't do that. It's probably the truth, but that kind of gloating transactional account book mind, where on the back page you put the goodies, no, throw that away. So now the gift of Dharma. So this is for those of you and us who are Dharma teachers. It's explained through 4 points: the listener, the motivation, the authentic Dharma, and presentation. So first of all, the person you teach. We only teach those who want to hear it. Doesn't matter if it's the truth or not. The ethics of Dharma generosity are that the person wants to hear it. Not only that, they need to have respect for the Dharma. That's number 2. Number 3, not only that, they need to have respect for the person, that's you, who's teaching it. They don't respect you, or if they don't really respect the Dharma, or if they're not really asking for it, then even though it's the wonderful truths of the Buddha, we don't go out preaching, proselytizing, or in more subtle ways, trying to impose our thinking, Buddhist thinking, on people. Of course, it's not so clear-cut as this. Things like, educating children, they're not asking for Dharma, but parents, I know many, many, many Buddhist parents, of course, you have to think just what and how and when to teach, what is truly ethical and kind, and so on. So that's the person taught. And somewhere in these 4 things, what I need to mention that people don't know is the ethics of a Buddhist teacher. Because of this, then let's say you're going to a Lama so-and-so. The normal rule is teachings are on request. You only give once a request has been made. So in the past, people made formal requests. If you read the biographies, you see the person folded their hand, they circumambulated the teacher 3 times, they bowed down on one knee, and then asked for teaching. Very, very kind of nicely done. The teacher doesn't come out and teach you uninvitedly. I have heard many people over the years at Samiling who they said, but surely Akon Rinpoche would have told me, or surely Lama Yeshe would have done this, because they feel this person is my teacher, so they're going to tell me. And there's a very big misunderstanding in that way. It can happen if you are that close and that familiar with your teacher through a good teacher-student working relationship over time, then you can say, please, if ever there's something, please you tell me first. If you see me going wrong, if you see me doing this, that can happen. But for thousands of years, the ethic is you only teach when something is asked for. And I've seen people confused and disappointed because they expected to be managed. It's that kind of, it's what do you call it? A society that looks after you. Somebody ought to do something. My teacher ought to do something. It's not a cowboy society, Wild West, where you have to look after yourself. Not that kind of mentality. Look after yourself. Go to a teacher, get teachings. You feel I'm taken in charge, I'm taken care of by a system. There's a lot to look into there, but I need to tell you that the basic ethic for a teacher is you don't teach unless you've been asked. So that's that point. The second one is the motivation. One should get rid of wrong motivations. It means teaching Dharma without concern for honors, praise, or fame, and not to have materialistic involvements. You don't give extra teachings to the richer sponsors. You don't give teachings because you think I can give a flashier explanation than teacher XYZ down the road. I'm going to wow them now with a sort of a Ken Holmes teaching, tell them things they never thought of, tickle their imagination, dig out things from references they've not read because it's not published in English yet. All sorts of things you could do to look like a good teacher. But that's about you. It's not about you. It's about them. And they might come and ask for complicated, profound, sophisticated teachings. What they really need is something much more simple, and so on. So it's not about us, our own reputation, about competition, and so on. Now, unfortunately, in Tibet, there were a lot of good things, but there are also a lot of things that went wrong. And sponsors were needed. I mean, imagine you have a monastery of 1,000 monks or nuns, monks and nuns. They've got to eat. You don't grow food. Somebody has to give it. You've got a monastery with butter lamps. They use a lot of butter. Monks can't produce butter by meditating. Somebody with cows or yaks or trees or other, they need to give the butter. So there was a lot of pandering to sponsors. Sponsors got a lot of privilege, and very often big sponsors expected their eldest son to be declared a reincarnate Lama. And some Tibetan Rinpoches laugh about this. They say, oh yeah, such and such monastery, he was the butter lamp tulku. In other words, he was the first son of the family that provided all the butter for the butter lamps. So he's got a cushy job for life, and he wouldn't be given a lot of Dharma teaching responsibility, but he'd become such and such tulku. This happened a lot. By current estimation, by people I respect, Rinpoches I respect, they'd say maybe 1 in 15 Tibetan tulkus was really a reincarnation of a great spiritual being. The rest were there for all sorts of political, family, financial reasons. So anyway, we don't need any of that. But it says you must examine your own motivation when you teach again and again and again, so that it really is a loving, selfless care for somebody else and their own development in terms of their capacity to learn and grow and their own interests. And then the third thing is we need to give authentic Dharma. Ideally, the whole thing is given by quotation, quoting from the scriptures, quoting from the great masters appropriately, and you can't go wrong. Mixing one's own ideas, projections with the Dharma is a tricky thing. So one has to find the balance between making Dharma relevant, for instance, something I'm faced with all the time, how to bring the point across in a modern world using modern analogies and examples, but staying absolutely true to the original meaning. If we read wonderful teachers like Patrul Rinpoche, he lived in a pastoral society, so many examples to do with looking after sheep and yaks. Most of the people I teach aren't looking after sheep and yak. Some of them never been in the countryside. So it needs to be authentic Dharma. And then the way it's presented, it says, if somebody asks you for instruction, don't teach them there and then. It's not fitting. It says, if someone requests you the Dharma, first say, oh, I don't know it very well. I've never studied it that much. You know, somebody says, hey, can you tell me, Ken, about the Hevajra Tantra? Oh, Hevajra Tantra, I don't know much about that at all. You don't teach it straight away. You give time. You consider the suitability of that person to receive the teachings they've asked for. So the way you do this is you make an appointment. Gives you time to think, and then, however, you can help them by giving teachings in a certain way. it should be done in a clean and pleasant place. And so in other places it says you don't teach in busy corridors, or so if someone comes and buttonholes you and said, can you know this thing about voidness and that, and then it's noisy and people are passing, and you say, let's meet somewhere quiet, let's have a cup of tea together where you can sit down. It gives you time to think about that person and what will be helpful, maybe what might not be helpful. So it says, then in such a place you should teach from a teaching throne. Did I have fun with this in Samiling? But that's another story. Because you see, I'm a Westerner. I don't have Tibetan eyes. I don't have red robes. But I was a fully accredited Dharma teacher. And I remember the shock when I said, you know, it says in Gampopa, you should have a throne. Now, it's not because I wanted a throne. It's because it's practical. This is the whole reason for a throne. When you've got a room full of people and you're at the same level, you only see the front row, and the people at the back can't see you or hear you. And then when you look into bodily energies, if you look down on somebody, literally, it creates a certain feeling. And if you look up, it creates a different feeling. And that's why people prostrate. Lamas up there, it's kind of, ooh, they're big, they're important, they're special. And kind of down there, it's different. There are very real reasons for putting a Dharma teacher on a throne. And really, and I'm very pleased because the Karmapa, President Karmapa, cottoned onto this, and he changed the Tibetan system of thrones, which is absolutely crazy. It's not really related to spiritual capacity one bit. It's to do with status and all sorts of other factors. And Tibetans get very nervous about it, even Rinpoches. See, when Rinpoche from another tradition is coming, do we give him 3 cushions or 4 cushions? And it's kind of, no. If they're teaching Dharma, you put them all on a throne that's high enough to see, and it's a Dharma teacher throne, full stop. So that's what Karmapa did in the Kajuman lands in India. Brilliant, brilliant. All the Rinpoches, all the people, they're all on the same level. In the Serta monastery in Tibet, wonderful place, such intelligent reforms of what went wrong in the Tibetan system. And then everybody does the cleaning of the toilets. Rinpoches, tulkus, khenpos, ordinary people. There's a rota. You live here, you shit, you clean the toilets. You know, it's as simple as that. And then the only person who ever sits on a small throne is the person who's teaching that day. Even if Rinpoches, tulkus, khenpos are attending, or sit on the same level as everybody else, you're a listener, you're receiving Dharma. It's brilliant. But anyway, when I talked about this at Samiling, it was kind of, first I had to show that Ken didn't want a throne because Ken wants a throne now. And then, you know, this is the Dharma. And they thought about it, and it was good. I got a throne. And then because I got a throne, it meant that other Western teachers who were accredited teachers could also get a throne and be seen and be heard and be looked up to. Anyway, it says, well seated on an elevated Dharma seat, which is beautifully arranged with various pieces of cotton cloth. One should be clean, properly dressed, neat and tidy, and one should behave correctly while explaining the Dharma. It's a very huge responsibility. Then when everyone has assembled, taken their seats, and the person seated has taken their Dharma seat, they should recite the mantra which overcomes the power of negative forces, so that negative forces cannot harm the teaching. So quite a few of you have asked, because you wanted to join in, about, I said, what's the prayer you do at the beginning? And then I write back to the people who've asked and say, it's not a prayer, it's this mantra which stops any negative forces from harming. So that you've got in your text, Deyata shamawati shamita shatra hamkuri mamkuri marijiti karuta kayori. Tejuwati oloyani vishuddha nimale malapanaye kukure kaka grase grasana ommuki paramuki amuki shamidavani savagraha bandhanani nigri hidva savava prawadina vimukta marapasha savidva buddhamudra anugatita savamari utsarita parishuddha bigashantu savamara kamani. That's the mantra, but unless you're a Dharma teacher, of course, you don't need it. But what the Buddha said is, he was talking to somebody called Sagaramati, ocean of intelligence. Ocean of intelligence, if one recites the words of this mantra beforehand, no maras or negative forces within a radius of 100 kilometers will be able to come and harm the teaching. Even if somehow they could manage to come, they could not create an obstacle. Having said this mantra, one should explain the Dharma clearly, articulately, and not too much, just in the right amount. Now, there we've looked at three sorts of generosity: material, giving of yourselves, your support, and giving Dharma. We've looked at the nuts and bolts, the good things, the bad things, things to do, things not to do. But now specifically, and I need to carry on mainly next week with this, having looked at the nuts and bolts, the karma of generosity, and then how it's mainly to get rid of ego and ego clinging, then now what makes it specifically Bodhisattva paramita of generosity. And so these are point 5a, 5b, and so on. We need to make our generosity great and pure. Great means enormous. More and more powerful, more and more voluminous, bigger in every way. Any act of generosity in the mind, in the speech, in the body, whatever act, how can we make it just so different that it contributes to enlightenment, not just freedom from samsara, but enlightenment. So we need three things to make it great, and we need two things to make it pure. In general, we need to make it great and pure. Any one moment of generosity, great and pure. Three things make it great, two things make it pure. There's some overlap. So the three things are, two of them are in Sanskrit: jhana, pranja, and dedication. Jhana is deepest wisdom. It's wisdom of Buddha mind. Only that. We saw that in the Mahamudra course with the term insight or vipassana. In that context, in Mahayana context, it's presence of Buddha mind, wisdom of Buddha mind. So jhana needs to be present. And then there's another word for wisdom, pranja, which is a more general global word for wisdom. That needs to be present. And then dedication is when the act is complete, the way our mind envisages, conceives of what has just been done. Jhana, if we explain it simply, I mean, you can't explain it. We had that in the Mahamudra prayer. You can't say it is this, you can't say it's not this. We had all those verses. It's real, natural ground state of mind, Buddha mind. But we do know that it is beyond duality and it's beyond triplicity. And we can apply this, we can train in it from the beginning. So we tried to go beyond giver and receiver and an act of giving. So it's not I'm giving you or I gave you, where we make an ego of ourselves. We define ourselves with the giver, the person who gave, the person who sacrificed, whatever it was. And we don't fix into a personality projection the receiver, and the same for the actual act of giving. So we tried to go beyond those, being Buddha mind, where all of them, they're like, if mind was water, they're just all movements in water. The bit that's me, the bit that's you, the bit that's giving, it's all the same. It's like if you look at a screen like the one you're looking at now, pixels. Okay, one person, it's a karate film. Okay, one person bops the other person. The bopper, the bopping, and the bopped, all three of them are pixels. It's just all little points of light jumping around. But the way our mind sees and segregates, then you've got the goodie, the baddie, and the bopping, or whatever's going on. We have projections, definitions. That makes them seem very different. But sometimes you can stop when you're watching a film, stop in your tracks and just see it all as little points of light, like that. So anyway, however it works, the jhana means we go beyond the triplicity of giver, receiver, act of giving. The second thing, pranja, the wisdom, is we apply all of our Buddhist wisdom, which means mind skills on a relative level, to the act. So let's say I am going to give you, what can I give you? What's really nice? Day before yesterday, I bought some fresh lychees on the branch. Absolutely delicious. So let's say I'm giving you an absolutely delicious fresh lychee, right? So the actual thing is that I take one, I bought them, they're mine. I take one, I give it to you, it's now yours, and you eat it, and it's so nice, right? Act over, action of generosity accomplished. So on a relative level, what I can do with my mind, well, that depends where you're at in the Dharma. I can think, just now I'm giving you a lychee, but in our lives and lives to come, can I give you the delicious fruit of all of the Dharma so that your life comes to fruition? And like a seed that's planted and makes a tree full of fruits, you become blah, 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 blah. Thoughts like that. And then, or if I'm doing Chinrezig practice, then myself and all the universe are Chinrezig and Taras. So I'm actually visualizing that I'm Chinrezig with 4 arms now. So one of those arms is giving you the lychee, and you are Tara, or you are Chinrezig. And the whole thing takes place within the purity, and the feel of Dewa Chen is there, the feel of beings of light and sharing, so that there's a transcendent connection between us, beside this body giving you a lychee fruit that you're putting in your flesh and mouth and tongue and eating. There's something, wherever our relative Dharma, whatever beautiful thoughts, meaningful thoughts we can have, thoughts of appreciation for all the people who grew it. If you're working with interdependence, realizing the incredible interdependence that got that lychee into your house, and you give it to somebody else who's going to eat it, who's going to go to the toilet, and then maybe where the toilet water goes and what that's going to do. Endless interdependence. So much we can do with our relative mind, depending where our practice is at. So whatever we can do multiplies it. Because now we're not thinking just I gave you a lychee, but through all of the interdependence that gave me Dharma, in future lives may I be able to give you, and may you be able to give me the Dharma. It becomes big. It covers many lifetimes. It covers benefit for many people, which you start to feel is endless. It gets bigger and bigger. And then in particular, we have a prayer called Samanta Bhadra's Offering Clouds, where like if you give one thing, you imagine it multiplies into 100, then each of the 100 becomes 100 more, and they become 100 more. And so it just multiplies. So as I'm giving you the lychee, then bodhisattvas everywhere are giving beings all sorts of food, clothes. That moment of giving with your mind on a relative level can be so powerful and big and free from ego of I'm giving you the best lychee in the world. You should be grateful to me. That goes in the account book. We free our mind at the same time we make it huge, endless, and beautiful. So that's pranja. And then when it's done, before we spoil it with pride or regret or anything, we dedicate it. We let go. That's gone. Let go. Move on. It's finished. You don't dwell on it. You don't let ego get into there and mess around with it in any way. So the power of primordial wisdom makes it great in the sense of elevating it to Buddha mind level beyond triplicity. The power of pranja expands it, as I just explained. And then the power of dedication makes it immeasurable. It won't be a quantitative karma where you got however many points you get for giving a lychee. You got 3.5 points on your karma card. And you want to fill up your card so you can cash it in to get a Brahma rebirth. It's not like quantitative, you get so much. We want to make it immeasurable. Now this goes so deep. The example that's given is a drop of water all by itself will evaporate very quickly. But if you put a drop of water in a lake or in the ocean, it will be there forever. So, of course, technically, that makes sense if you don't push it too far. But just in general, you can see a drop of water evaporate in an hour, and you put it in the lake and it will be there for centuries as part of the water. But if you look a bit deeper, what are you doing? You're putting water which out of its natural state evaporates. You're putting it with like kind in its right place. So when we dedicate, then whatever goodness we just did, we're not using it for selfish karma. I got 1 lychee credit for next life. We are using it, we're putting that goodness in with greater goodness, universal goodness, natural goodness, which is the welfare of everyone, and not just the temporary welfare, but to bring all beings to enlightenment. So our dedication prayer is always to let go, but to let go with that big mind of enlightenment for everybody. And we learn to make that a habit. We don't get stuck in what we're giving, because sometimes in our life, if it's in our family or in our work, every day we have to give to somebody. It's demanding. So we make a habit of letting go and giving that to everybody. And then we don't feel sorry for ourselves so much, or we don't feel resentful, or we don't feel that life's unfair. It's wonderful. You just gave, had an opportunity to give, you gave, that's it. Simple, simple, normal. Anybody. It's what any good bodhisattva would do. So I think there I need to stop. We're not quite finished with these basic things of Mahayana Bodhisattva generosity. But the next section about making it pure, I don't want to rush. It's about blending shunyata with compassion. That's what brings the purity. So, well, what an ideal moment to dedicate the goodness of this session, whatever was good, whatever was helpful, then we dedicate it to everybody. Everybody includes us. We dedicate it to our future lives. We may follow the path well. We may give of ourselves. We may give up the clinging. And we'll be able to give Dharma to more and more other beings. Sonam diye tamche zikpane, topne nyepe dranam pomchene, je ganache palap trukpaye, sipe tsole, drowarasho. Janchub semcho rinpoche, maje panam jejochik, jepa nyampa mepadam, kongne, kongdo, velwarasho. Thank you. So, over to you. And I don't know if you've got anything you'd like to say or any questions you'd like to ask, but please do.
I've got Alex. A question. Yes.
Hi, Alex, yeah.
On this actual piece of teaching you've just given us, there have been a couple of people in my life who I felt would take it in and benefit from it. But of course, I'm not qualified to teach it. And is it appropriate if I just refer them to the written teachings on this? So they're not requesting a teaching. I'm just in my own mind thinking maybe this would land with them. So is that appropriate that I direct them to a text about this?
Yeah, it's very appropriate that you direct them to a text, or these days, there's stuff on YouTube, there's stuff on internet. They're very, very good teachers. But I remember often people would ask Hakon Rinpoche about sharing Dharma teachings when they weren't a Dharma teacher. And it's very much like the instructions we had today. If your motivation's good, and if it will really help, then without making it a formal teaching, you can just in a very kind of natural, friendly way share, well, this is what I heard, this seems to me very good. There's a way you can phrase it where they don't have to relate to you as a teacher. That's different for me because of my job role, and I have to make sure that somebody does respect that, because I've got that title, like it or not. And so you need the feeling that, whoops, this isn't just friend Ken, but this is a Dharma moment that's coming through from a lineage. So that's different. But if we are regular, everyday people, it's good to share these things. It's good to share these things. I think don't be shy at doing it if you feel, very naturally, this person's going to benefit, and this is the authentic teaching. It's quite clear in my own mind. I know what I'm talking about. And then you can always refer to somebody else or to some references. But I wouldn't be too shy.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have a question? And it is about the giving of Dharma. You mentioned it today about how one should behave correctly and be bathed and nicely attired. Can you say more about the reasoning behind that, please?
It's because it's almost inevitable. The people identify the Dharma teaching with the Dharma teacher. You know, as they're receiving it, they've got a constant kind of flow of impression coming in, and it's very worldly. I think it's a very kind of a simple thing of associations. So that if it's you, the Dharma teacher, or another Dharma teacher, Achan this, or whoever it is, the person's on the throne, they look nice, and then they kind of disappear. Whereas if you're looking at the snot hanging from their nose, or the fleas running around in their hair, or whatever it is, you know, it's identified, it's associated. And it comes also from the original teachings in India, where personal cleanliness was easy and very much a part of Hindu life, Buddhist life, because there was enough water around, people could clean, or at least partially clean. And like people go into temples, they wash their feet, they wash their hands. There's a kind of feeling of a temple is a place of cleanliness. And then the teacher. So in Tibet, it's very different. Some Tibetans only wash once a year, one time of the year, because it's so cold, and then, you know, the water and so on. It's just a very different set of circumstances. So I think for lots of Tibetan teachers in the past, how can you say, all their teachings would have been cancelled if they had to apply these rules. And Milarepa, you know, it's famous when people came to him. He would sometimes be naked, and often he'd have these dreadlocks, he'd be dirty. So it's a simple thing, very simple thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ken, years ago, I got a very interesting lesson from Taisi Tupa. He was visiting Dublin, and I was his chauffeur, and he wanted to buy a pair of shoes. So I took him into Dublin, and I think we went into 3 shoe shops, and he must have tried on countless pairs of shoes. And eventually he was wearing a pair of shoes that he quite liked. And he asked me what I thought. And I said, yes, they look very nice. But he was doubtful, and he looked down at them. And they were very nice brown shoes. But there was, on each one, there was a tiny sliver of gold.
Mm.
And he said, no, he said, that's not appropriate. First of all, those tiny slivers of gold might attract their attention rather than the teachings. And he said, and secondly, they might think I'm being very boastful about having a little bit of gold on my shoes. So it was these tiny little bits, and yet he decided, no, I won't buy those shoes. So it was extraordinary detail that he was thinking about.
Mm. Yeah, he was very aware of that, how people saw him.
Ken.
I saw
Sorry.
better not mention where or who, but a lama, and I looked at his watch. I thought, it can't be. And then after lunch break or something, I went and checked it up online, and it was a $15,000, I forget which make, watch. And so we're quite friendly. So I went back and I said to him, that's an amazing watch you've got there. He said, is it? I said, yeah. He said, oh, yeah. One of my students gave it to me a couple of weeks ago. But the thing is, like most Tibetan lamas, he'd have probably taken it off and given it to a monk or somebody who liked it, and then got another one which might have been a $5, and it wouldn't have mattered. But I thought I need to tell him, because other people do know that that's a $15,000 watch, and then they start thinking, lamas, yeah, but lamas who are Rolls Royce, expensive watch, that kind of a lama. And it was just amazing. He was kind of, oh yeah, is it? All right, and didn't matter. But people do project amazingly. Sorry, somebody was.
Yes, so it's Isabel Ken.
Yeah.
Hi. I just want to ask about the Bodhisattva vow, because we're working towards not being in samsara, so free of it. But if we take the Bodhisattva vow, then we will keep returning until everybody becomes enlightened. We will come back to help. So are we asking that, yes, we are in the samsara, but we're not caught by its entrapments?
Yeah, and it's even more than that. I mean, samsara isn't really a place.
No.
It's a state of mind. So we're getting out of samsara, which is an ego-centered state of mind which causes us and others suffering. Simple as that. As you do that, then your perception will change and you will see the world through very different eyes anyway. So samsara's not out there. We will be reborn, but not reborn into samsara. So there's kind of levels of that. At first we can see it as you can be in the world but not of the world. That's easy. We can understand that. But what we need to factor in is our own perception changing as we become more and more the Bodhisattva. Then what we've defined as samsara, through projecting onto him and her and what they do and what the Conservative Party do or what Putin does, or the whole way we project life will be different.
Thank you.
So as a Bodhisattva, we're definitely all Buddhists on a path want to get out of samsara. But getting out of rebirth is something where the Buddhist schools vary. To get out of a clinging selfish mind, we have to get away from the triggers, attractive bodies, attractive food, sensorial pleasures of all sorts. If you have to get away from that to free your mind, that's one attitude. So you don't want to be reborn. But then if you don't mind being reborn, and there can be attractive bodies, but you're not interested, or attractive sensorial pleasures, but the only reason you're in this life is to bring benefit to others, then it's not samsara. So there are different attitudes towards rebirth. But rebirth doesn't mean rebirth in samsara, it means rebirth. Samsara is your own state of mind.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, well, if you don't mind, then we'll finish there. We already did the dedication. I remember last week there was a request to talk this week about organ donation. I've not forgotten. It's a very important topic, or it's an important topic. And so next week, I think it fits better with next week's teaching anyway. So have a lovely week. Wishing you all the best. Take good care.
Best wishes to Katya.
Thank you so much, and I hope Katya gets better quick.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
And Ken.
Love to Katya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Mm.